Community Heart and Soul is an initiative that Legacy Foundation has launched in Lake County. So what we'll talk about today is we'll share a little bit about Legacy Foundation and our commitment to community engagement. We'll share about Community Heart and Soul and an overview of Cedar Lake's work in year one. Cedar Lake was the first Heart and Soul community that we selected in Lake County, so we've been working with them for a year now. It's a multi-year program, so the next community that we select, just like Cedar Lake, it's a multi-year commitment where we'll be working with these communities over a period of time. And then we'll talk about the program requirements and the application process. So a little bit about Legacy Foundation for those of you who aren't too familiar with us. We are the community foundation for Lake County. So we serve all 19 communities within Lake County by providing strategic leadership and philanthropic support to ensure equitable opportunity for all communities that we serve. We've awarded in 2024, we awarded over $5 million in grants to nonprofits and over $1.5 million in scholarships to students to attend college. We work with donors to help them reach their charitable goals. So unlike private or corporate foundations, our funds that we're able to reinvest locally come directly from donors who care about Lake County, who care about Northwest Indiana and want to give local, and we work with them to direct their donations to local groups, organizations, and support initiatives and projects that help build our communities. We provide Lake County organizations capacity building resources. So we know that our funds alone can't address the great need that's here in the communities, and so a big part of our focus is community engagement. So strengthening our communities by engaging residents, and then also working directly with the nonprofit organizations to build their capacity. So that's through our learning lab, through trainings. Collaboration building opportunities, and grants. We provide Lake County High School seniors and college students with scholarship opportunities, and we engage with residents and small businesses to help get them more involved in envisioning the future of their communities and acting on that. And so to kind of, I guess, sum up what I was just talking about, I think our strategic plan that we launched in 2024, summarizes what our 5 key pillars are and how we work within those pillars to build a stronger Lake County. So strengthening organizations, which talked about building capacity for nonprofits, connecting communities. So that's things like what we're talking about today, community heart and soul. Giving locally. So that's working with donors to encourage them to give locally when there's so many options out there nationally and internationally, and so many great causes. Often small community-based organizations get lost in all that noise. And so we try to work to direct donors and lift up those local organizations so that donors will consider giving to them. Mobilizing philanthropy, and so that's kind of then once those funds come in the door, getting it out the door and expanding the reach of grants and scholarships, and then supporting entrepreneurship. So that's through our NWI Biz Hub initiative, where we provide resources and information to entrepreneurs and small business owners about what's available to them. So community engagement, here's just a couple examples of some of our past community engagement initiatives and how we got started. So I would say prior to 2013, Our grants were largely through, just an application process. The organization would apply, we would review and award the funding. We still do have that through our Transform Lake County grants. But around, 2012, 2013, we decided to also move toward kind of more of a transformational strategy, where we have initiatives that we're working with the communities and with nonprofits to be able to have a greater impact in how we use our funds and how we can invest in communities and organizations. And so in 2013 to 2018, we hosted Neighborhood Spotlight. The four communities that we worked with were Emerson, downtown Emerson and Gary, Miller and Gary, Griffith, and Northwest Hober. So that was a multi-year initiative where we engaged residents on envisioning what they wanted to see for the future of their communities and developed a quality of life plan based on the feedback that we received. So over 200 resident interviews for each community were conducted and helped inform that plan. And then we worked with those communities over a period of time, over years, to help implement some of the things that they envisioned through that plan. And so, things like, Faith Farms Urban Garden in downtown Emerson came out of that. In Miller, the Take Bike the Streets, so the bicycle hubs, the First Friday Fest was launched, the kayak launch in Marquette Park came out of that. Some of the art projects in the community came out of that. So in Hobart, they rebranded the Northwest Hobart region as the Nature District, and engaged residents around events and and public art. And then after that, we moved into On the Table. So some of you may have been a part of those conversations from 2017 to 2019. We had over 3,600 residents participate in community conversations where we gave residents the opportunity to share their vision through a conversation, and we collected that data to create a report that could help provide information for grants, for programs, collaborations. We shared that information with the public, with local municipalities about what people wanted to see for the futures of their communities. And then we awarded community action awards to people who had ideas that came out of those conversations.
Thank you, Kelly. I just wanted to just say a little bit about Community Heart and Soul as a national organization. It's in more than 130 small cities and towns across the US. And it started about 20 years ago with the intention that it was important for communities to come together and decide their future collectively. And it was started by Lyman Orton, who is a proprietor of the Vermont Country Store, that he saw in his own town that some planning decisions were taken that didn't benefit all of the community. So he wanted to set up an organization where communities across the country could come together, be better engaged, and through storytelling, work out a plan for the future that benefits all of the community. Last year, as already mentioned, Lake County introduced Community Heart and Soul to Indiana, and through Cedar Lake, the first community in Indiana. We're very, very happy that they brought Community Heart and Soul to the state. And we're really looking forward to the next community that embarks on their heart and soul journey.
Thanks, Ian. So now we're going to talk about what is Community Heart and Soul, what is the program, what is the process, and what does it look like to be a heart and soul community. And I just want to say I apologize for my voice. If you have a hard time understanding me, please flag me down and we'll transition to someone else talking. So Community Heart and Soul is a way for people to rediscover what is unique and special about the way and where they live. It is recognized nationally by the American Planning Association, and it restores pride and builds stronger, healthier, and more economically vibrant communities through its unique resident-driven model. The goal really is simple. It engages everyone in town to identify what they love most about their community, what wishes they have for their community, and what ideas they have for action for the future of their community. The stories and the ideas told by the residents become the data for your future community action plan. So the Community Heart and Soul model is a unique approach to community planning and development, and it is designed to increase participation and engage residents in shaping the future of their community. The program is based on 3 principles, and those are involve everyone, hearing from residents, especially those voices who are often missing or overlooked in the community, is a core priority of the program. Focus on what matters most. When residents share what they love most about where they live and what they would like to see for the future of their community, common themes start to emerge. These are the things that matter most to the residents, and these are the things that become the foundation for the future decision making of the program and the community at large. And play the long game. So Community Heart and Soul is really just the beginning to a new way that your town can start to view themselves, how decisions are being made, and how residents interact with one another. This process is really going to help you gain skills and tools for the community to rethink and transform your future. So what is the Heart and Soul approach? It is a 4-phase program aimed at increasing community engagement and sustaining it. That's a key piece of it, so that more people are involved and invested in the decisions made about their community. Each phase builds upon the one before it to build a diverse network of people within your community who are invested and ready to play a part to make things happen in the community. So now we'll take a look at a little bit within each phase and what happens. So the program begins in phase 1, and I really like to think about this as the bulk of kind of the back end work. The selected community will spend about 2 to 3 months of organizing the initial set of volunteers and the Heart and Soul core team members. Team members will identify program goals, begin working on a document called the Community Network Analysis, which we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And the group will identify specific tasks that need to be developed for the success of the program. They'll also focus on initial messaging for the launch of the program. This includes a logo, website, and other fun communication tools. In addition to the logistical work in phase 1, towards the end of the phase, the core team and the volunteers will be planning a community launch. This will probably be the first real public engagement opportunity in the community, and it should be used as a celebration of what has been achieved so far. And you'll learn very quickly we like to celebrate things and have fun. So then we transition into phase 2. And I like to look at phase 2 as really the true nuts and bolts of the program. So this is when you spend about 6 to 8 months, maybe a little bit longer, connecting with your community. You're going out gathering stories. You're hearing what they love most, those wishes for the future, and those ideas for action. You'll hear those 3 things a lot. This is also where you'll be able to dive really deeper into the conversations with individuals about the concerns, passions, and really what matters most to them. So we do these things through 2 types of story gathering, and that's thin and thick story gathering. So thin story gathering are those quick thoughts. It's usually written down on a piece of paper, on a storyboard, something quick. It can be collected on the go at a farmer's market, at a store. It can be done online. And those are kind of fun, positive messages. Then you have thick story gathering, and that can be handled a couple different ways, but those are the more personal conversations. It could be either one-on-one, small groups. If you participated in our On the Table program in the past that Kelly was talking about earlier, it's very similar to that. And this is where you can really dive deeper into the reasonings and the feelings behind a person's response and really get more data. It's also a great opportunity to get to know your fellow neighbors and residents across your community you probably have never met before. So all the stories that you're collecting over time and really the voices of your neighbors, this becomes your data. And throughout your story gathering, we'll work together to summarize that. And you're going to add it to something called a project spreadsheet. And as you keep collecting stories, I will encourage you to share those stories out and celebrate those stories you receive, and that will encourage others to share their voices. Eventually, in phase 2, you get to a point where you'll feel that you have enough data, and this is where you'll start drafting something called heart and soul statements, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And as the phase wraps up, you'll go back to the community with these drafted statements and ask them if they agree with these statements, because these statements just aren't your core team statements, these are community statements. And once the community agrees with these statements, they get adopted. And these are going to be shared by everybody. And then, shocker, once we're done, we celebrate. So I just wanted to highlight a few examples of story gathering. So on the left side, we have a couple photos of thin story gathering. So on the bottom is an example from a community in Colorado in partnership with a local pub. They paired it with a launch of a new beer, and they asked guests to write on the back of coasters. And then at the top is from our own Cedar Lake community at a recent farmers market. They have 2 questions that they ask people to write on cutouts of hearts. And it's, what is your favorite place in town, and what do you love most about Cedar Lake? And then for thick story gathering, 2 examples. On the bottom, you have a group conversation. And for a group conversation, traditionally you have an interviewer and then a note taker. And then at the top, you have someone who's conducting, it looks like a family interview. And a lot of times when you have an interview, whether it's one-on-one or a family interview, the individual may be recorded and they might be taking notes at the end. So you are taking all of these information from the stories, and that becomes your data. And as I mentioned, then you are going to be creating these heart and soul statements. And these statements are built upon everything that your fellow residents said, and it really will guide the activities and the results in the next 2 phases. They highlight really what residents love, identify what makes your town special, and express the relationships and the connectedness throughout your community. So then you shift into phase 3. Not as long as phase 2, but is still a lengthier phase. And this is where you take those heart and soul statements that the community agreed upon, and you start gathering action ideas that align with each of those statements. You're digging deeper now within those. And then you start prioritizing those action ideas, and you start to make decisions about which ones are you wanting to move forward with. So during this about 4 to 6 month period, you're going to really want to start bringing in as many people as possible to discuss these action ideas. You're always, during all these phases, you're going to be bringing in new people. You'll also start drafting your community action plan during this phase. And then, of course, celebrate at the end. And then finally, we get into phase 4. And then during this phase, we're focused on finalizing our action plan and sharing it with everyone that will listen. That includes the residents, the government, organizations. We're taking our statements to the local government and organizations and asking them to acknowledge them and to adopt them. and that will look different depending on the community, and there's not a right or wrong way to do this. Another key component of phase 4 is thinking about what is next after this phase. So you will develop an action plan implementation strategy and activate a stewardship plan and a team that will help the community continue this momentum. So it's not phase 4 and then you're done. So this is going to continue beyond just this last phase. So the work never really ends. So we say there's the phase 4 phases, but we're after the action plan is published, and then one of the additional components that makes this program unique, the plan is really meant to live on in the community. It's not meant to just sit on a shelf. And it's really meant to be a resource for the community. It's meant to be a resource for the organizations. It's meant to be a resource for the government and the municipality. And it's supposed to be utilized and not just sitting. So broadly, what are some ways that Heart and Soul impacts and transforms towns? New leaders and volunteers, of course, are emerged. Residents throughout this whole process feel more connected to their community and have a greater sense of place. Throughout all 4 phases, as I mentioned earlier, you will be connecting and engaging with new faces, new volunteers, and some might come in at one point and then leave for a little bit, and then they might come back in later. But every single touch point is a new opportunity for someone. Trust is built and civic participation is increased. Downtowns are re-energized, pride is restored, and of course, history and culture are honored. So we just talked about a lot of details, and I'm sure you're wondering who does all this work and what support does your team probably get. We'll go into some more details about the support in a little bit when we get to the application component. But this chart outlines a traditional Heart and Soul team, but keep in mind that the makeup of this team will look different for each community, and there's not necessarily one right way to build a team. So starting with the most important components, the community, and that will be everyone in blue in this circle. So you have the Heart and Soul core team. That is the group of resident volunteers who act as a steering committee for the organization. And they organize and implement the initial program structure. They also work with the project coordinator to develop and implement the work and carry out the activities during all of the phases. Then you have the project coordinator, which is identified within that big circle. And that is a paid member of the community who coordinates the Heart and Soul effort to keep the team and volunteers on track and on time. So they focus on the administrative and the logistical side, and they serve as that liaison between the volunteers, the coach, Legacy Foundation, and the government. The project coordinator works with the local team to development, implement all the phased work plans, track, celebrate those milestones, and they oversee the project as a whole. Then you have the outside circles around in the blue, and those are your municipal leaders, your sub teams, and additional volunteers. And so this is really where those roles will look different for each community, but they're equally important for all. And so Legacy Foundation requires at least one municipal representative to play an active role in the core team, but we absolutely encourage others to play an active role as well. So sub-teams will be focused on working on various tasks throughout the project. And so those are really the working groups. And so that could be communications, data management. Then you have volunteers who may only be available for your 1 or 2 events. But they're just as important to the project as someone who can commit more regular time. Then we have the additional entities on the side next to the blue circles, and those are your supporting entities throughout the project. So you have the Community Heart and Soul Organization. That's the national group that Ian was talking about, and they provide program development, training, tools, technical assistance for implementing the program. They also manage a national community of practice, so towns have a network to learn from one another. That is also where Legacy Foundation gained all of its resources and knowledge about the program. So then in our case, the funding partner and the heart and soul coach is coming from the same entity, Legacy Foundation. And so the selected community will be partnered with us. And so I will provide guidance, training, and technical support as you navigate the heart and soul model. So the coach also serves as a liaison between the community and the National Community Heart and Soul Organization. So then, as I already mentioned, the National Community Practice is a huge resource for communities. It brings together members nationally just to learn and gain inspiration, share challenges, successes, and it is really something that I encourage the selected community to lean on. So then to summarize, Community Heart and Soul is purpose-built and designed specifically for towns and small cities. Their approach is not cookie cutter. The selected community will hear me say this many times. There is not a wrong answer, or it really depends. And I'm not gonna lie, this was very difficult for me at first. Ian can contest to that. But now I have to say that's something I love most about the program. It's really designed to embrace those unique characters of each community and the people who live there. It gives you that flexibility to make it your own while giving you enough guidance to keep you structured within the program. The work is face-to-face. And day one, actually, as part of your application, you are thinking about connections in your community. The many forms of community engagement throughout the program gets people out and meeting one another. Relationships are built, new leaders emerge, and volunteerism grows. Heart and Soul is data-driven. Community engagement and from story gathering, comments on a sticky note, it all generates data that's analyzed through our system. And this data provides a clear picture of what residents value most about their town. Heart and Soul is action-oriented. Community engagement's effective, comprehensive, and fun, and it leads to trust within and across different groups in your community. So I want to just highlight as we wrap up this section a few things that Cedar Lake has accomplished and where they're at currently in the process. So about the same time last year, they were sitting at a meeting just like this one, trying to figure out if this was a right opportunity for them. And so they were selected, as Kelly mentioned, and as Ian mentioned, not only as Lake County's first Heart and Soul community, but the state of Indiana's first community. And so they kicked off phase 1 in January, and they are currently in phase 2, actively collecting stories from residents. And so far, they have received over 300 story responses, engaged in conversation with over 100 residents, and connected with over 250 youth through story sharing drawing activities. So the team will be learning how to draft their heart and soul statements at the end of October, and they will be continuing to collect stories for probably the next couple months. So shifting over to community eligibility, and I'm gonna ask Kelly if you can take over this section for a second while I let my voice rest.
All right. Well, you did good, Miranda. You made it through pretty much further than I thought you would.
Right.
So eligibility and expectations. So in order to be eligible, a community must be located in Lake County and have a population of 40,000 or less. The selected community must be ready to begin phase 1 in January 2026 and commit to the heart and soul process at least over the next 2 years. And so it is a 2-year grant, and we'll be working closely with that community for a committed time period of 2 years. Our hope is that, there's energy and momentum that comes from that, and it extends far beyond that. But the agreement would be 2 years. Each application must identify a nonprofit convening partner. And so that can either be a 501c3 nonprofit organization or local municipal government. If it's a nonprofit, it can be of any size. It can be, something that's just local to that community, or it can serve, the all of Lake County, or it can be multi-county. They can be a resident-led community group that serves that community. So really any size type of organization. Or a fiscal sponsor can also be used, if it's a resident group that's working within that community, or like I mentioned, the municipal government, and we can then have the agreement with the local municipality. Community eligibility and expectations. So both the organization and the local government must at least have one staff person or elected official who will play an active role in the community heart and soul core team. The municipality and the organization must prioritize community involvement. And that's, not just heart and soul, but overall, we want to see that we're working with organizations and municipalities that value getting feedback from residents and that value community involvement. And so we want them to be open and inclusive and inviting residents from all backgrounds to actively participate in the process. And so it should be implemented through a partnership between the residents, the local nonprofit, and that local municipality. And what Legacy is offering the selected community. So up to $80,000 over 2 years to support the use of community heart and soul. So that would be $40,000 a year. And the selected community should raise a $10,000 local match, which would be then $90,000 total for the project. Legacy Foundation will also prioritize community heart and soul for future grants. And so then, looking at applying for a Transform Lake County grant after that 2-year period is over, if, it's something that's directly tied to something that came out of that plan, and you're implementing projects that were part of that, then, that would carry extra weight in that application process for Transform Lake County grants. The Heart and Soul Plan is also very valuable, and we've seen in the past that it can be used in, non-legacy foundation grants. And so as you're applying for funding with other, foundations or corporations or government grants, to be able to present this data that came from a community engagement process, and that, you've already gone through the planning, you've already engaged residents. It's really helpful and really useful to have this information when you're seeking outside funding sources. And so the funding that we provide, a big part of that is probably going to be staffing or a project coordinator. That is a required part of this project. It's part-time, and so it would be, just a portion of the funding. So it can be somebody who is already working in a volunteer role with, the community that maybe people know. And this would be a good way to provide them with some compensation for the work that they do, and really to kind of standardize and provide structure to it. It could be somebody that already exists and a portion of their role can be assigned to this. So part of that does have to be staffing. And then some supplies, some funding for supplies, events, marketing, and then implementation. So usually with that, we look at kind of, recommend like setting aside just some like low hanging fruit type funds. So whether it's a public, community event or a public art project, or ways to kind of get people more involved while you're going through the process. Ineligible expenses, overhead, indirect costs, and capital improvements. Training and support, so one-on-one coaching and technical support with Legacy Foundation staff, and that would be Miranda throughout the course of the Community Heart and Soul process. So Miranda is a trained heart and soul coach, so she's gone through a pretty intensive training process with the national organization, and will work closely with your community while you're going through the process. Invitation to participate in regular community of practice calls with the national network. That's one of my favorite things about, being a part of this community heart and soul model, is there's over, 100 community heart and soul communities throughout the country, and we can all learn from one another. We all share what works, what didn't work, ways to engage people, types of events, types of, ways that they've gone about getting feedback and data. And so it's really great to have that network and kind of that support system, the tools, the structure behind it, while at the same time, like Miranda said, there's structure, but then it's also kind of loose enough that it's adaptable to each community's individual needs. And then you'll receive access to resources, materials, in-person training, community network analysis, assistance with creating your plan, resident engagement planning. And so all of this is, at no cost. So it's all being provided in kind. The coaching time is being provided in kind. And so, and through both Legacy Foundation and through the National Community Heart and Soul Network. So application timeline, September 1, applications opened. They're due October 24th. And we will announce our Heart and Soul community on November 15th. Implementation timeline, late November to early December will be the introductory meeting. And then by early January, we would hope that the community will have hired their project coordinator, solidify core team, and begin their phase 1 training. And then heading into 2026, late March, early April, begin phase 2.1 training. April 26th, host a community launch party. And then heading into August and September would be a phase 2.2 training, which I know the phase 1 point, phase 2.1, 2.2, 3, it doesn't all mean much to you right now, but it's kind of just giving the outline that, heading into 2026, we'd be working with you through each phases of those trainings. And you want to take it over, Miranda? I saw you unmuted. No? Okay. Application timeline, September 1, application opens. Or wait, yeah. And then we already went through that, right? Submission details, all applications can be submitted on Legacy Foundation's online grant portal at legacyfdn.org. You can either use the community's municipality or nonprofit as the lead applicant. So whoever is not completing the application should provide a letter of support. And so if it's a nonprofit that's the applicant, then you will need a letter of support from the municipality, just demonstrating their commitment to be a part of the process. And then the contact info, so a little bit about the application. contact information. So that'll include contact information for both the selected organization and municipality representative. And it'll identify who will serve as the convening partner. And then with the narrative, you'll provide an overview of your community, why you're interested in participating. You'll identify the partners and the experience that they bring to the table. Information about the selected partner convening, or the convening partner, so their history, their role, why they're best to help facilitate. So this is where you'll want to provide a little bit of information about, why community engagement is important to them, and, think about your plan for both. So community history with resident participation, initial thoughts on forming your core team and hiring a project coordinator, and how you anticipate raising the $10,000 match. So you don't need to have a plan, but at least kind of that you have the capacity or experience, community support to be able to do something like that. So the application process, Section 3 will ask you to complete 2 activities in the application. There's a link to download the PDF that has both of the activities that are part of the application. So once you're in there, you'll see the link to be able to download those. So we encourage you to complete both activities with any partners you identify in your application. If you're selected, having completed these as a group will set you off with a really strong foundation to get started. And, and they're not too complicated that it makes it a really cumbersome application process. It's really just kind of thinking through, your readiness to be a part of something like this. So the first activity, the community readiness inventory, is essentially a checklist of 16 different statements related to the community. And it helps you think about your current strengths and opportunities as it relates to heart and soul. The next activity, the community brainstorming, is designed to help you think about who lives in your community and how those people are all connected to one another. So your first step would be to identify large general groups of people like seniors, veterans, business owners, and from there you'll identify subgroups. So those could be formal or informal subgroups that fall under the larger groups that you identified. So for veterans, for example, this could be like VFW, a ROTC program, Joe's Coffee Group. And then the third step would be to identify connectors. So these would be specific names of people that might connect you to those subgroups. So for example, if John Smith is the president of the VFW. And then the heart and soul application. So the final 2 sections of the application, letters of support. As we talked about, you're required to include a letter of support from the municipality or the nonprofit. If you're using a fiscal sponsor, you'll need a letter from that fiscal sponsor. You can submit additional letters, so up to 6 total letters of support. So if they're from residents or partner organizations, community leaders, other elected officials, just demonstrating, your organization or your community's commitment to this process. The final section is optional, but encouraged. So this is where you can show off your town in whatever way you want. So you can upload visuals, photos, videos, links, anything you want. You can be creative as you want. So it's not for additional letters of support, but really for us to just to get to know your community. And now I'll pass it over to Kelly Bear to give a quick overview of the application portal.
Let's see if we can get the screen sharing. Miranda, do I have rights to share? I don't see it for some reason. There we go. Okay. All right, so hopefully you can see our website. So when you're ready to apply, you'll just go into our website and you'll come over to the grant login. Make sure you stay away from the scholarship login. Those are two separate systems. They don't talk to one another, so that will make you very confused. So start with the grant login here. If you already have an account in the system, you can just enter your information and log on. If you've not been into the system before, you'll want to create a new account. The system, it doesn't take long, it'll walk you through it. If you enter your EIN number and you receive an error that EIN already exists in the system, please reach out to me and I can add you as a contact within your organization. Just don't proceed here in this space. But you'll enter your information. This is the only place that the application asks for this. So do make sure that you have it entered correctly. We use it to set up your profile in our system. Once you click next, it'll ask if you are the executive director. It is looking at this from, from the standpoint of a nonprofit. So you would enter yes if you are, no if not. If you're looking at it from a government standpoint, you can put someone higher up than yourself in that spot, and then it'll ask you to create your password and log you in. So we won't make you watch as I do that. We'll log in as one of my pretend applicants. So once you're in, if you've applied for anything else before or have any historical information, that would be shown here. Otherwise, you'll look at the top to the apply button, and everything that we have open will be listed on this page. So take a look. Maybe there is something else that your organization might be eligible for. The Transform Lake County grant that Kelly mentioned, that is currently open. And so if you're a nonprofit with a program or project that could use some additional support, you have until October 1st to submit that application. So take a look at that if that applies to you. But we are going to scroll down and looking for the Heart and Soul Year 2. If you would like to see the questions before you go into the application, you can click the preview button. Otherwise, just go straight into apply. Once you're in the system, you can see the information that was requested on that creation of account page is here. If you notice any errors, let me know and I can fix those for you. If you have applied for Heart and Soul previously, you could use the Copy Previous Answers button. That would import any information that was previously uploaded into an application into the system for you, get you a little bit of a head start. Just make sure you edit those answers very carefully. If you've not applied for Heart and Soul before, that's probably not going to find anything that would be helpful. There is also a Collaborate button here. So if there's a piece of the application that you would like your government entity or your nonprofit partner to be able to log into the application and complete those pieces for you, you can choose to add that person in as a collaborator. So you would just enter their email address and choose what they can do. Can they just look at the application? Can they make edits to it? Or can they edit, view, and submit the application on your behalf? You would just send them a quick message. Hey, I'd like your help in this application. Can you look at this piece for me? And then invite them. The system will send an automated email that will either prompt them to log into their current account or it will help them to create a new one. So that's a really nice way to get some help in the application if you need it. And then once you begin, just start walking through the application. This question is important for the population. It does have to be under 40,000. For whatever reason, the system does not like commas. So if you put your population in using a comma, you're going to get an error message. So just make sure the number, no commas. Since it does have to stay under that 40,000, you won't be able to see the rest of the application until you confirm that your population is the correct size. And then here, based on your answer, the 501c3, the convening partner, it will adjust the questions that are being asked to fit that. So if we say the municipality, it will update to request the letter of support from the nonprofit, vice versa if we select that we are the nonprofit partner. If you have any issues within the application, please reach out to me. I will be happy to take a look and see what might be going on in the system and try and help you solve any issues that are happening. The system does save in real time, but it never hurts before you log off. Just scroll all the way down to the bottom, push the save button just as a precaution. When you finish with the application and push submit, if there is a question that hasn't been filled out completely, or if it has an error, that question should be highlighted in red, so you can scroll back up through looking for a place that it has marked that might have a problem. The only thing that it doesn't do that sometimes is if you have entered too many characters, if you were a little too wordy in your response, sometimes that does not get flagged. So if you keep having an error, just look for something that tells you that you're over the word limit. When you're uploading files, make sure that everything is uploaded as a single PDF. If you try and upload one page and then upload a second, it's just going to overwrite what you put in the first time. So make sure everything is a single PDF. Miranda, were there any other specific elements that you wanted highlighted in the application? That was a really quick, this is how you get in and look at it. Just so if you would like to have a printed copy with your answers as you're going through, you can right click and press print, and that should print the copy with your responses in there for a final review.
That's good.
All right. Any questions from anyone? You've all been very silent in our chat today. So far, we're all doing great. No questions.
All right, well, I know it's 10 o'clock on the dot, so if we're happy to stick around for a few minutes if anybody does have any questions. Otherwise, we appreciate you joining today. Miranda will be following up, as she mentioned in the chat. She'll be following up after the session with with more information about the program. And you can feel free to reach out to Miranda with any specific questions, or if you want to talk specifically about your community. So any,
I had a question.
okay.
Would we be able to get a copy of this Zoom that you have saved and recorded that could be sent to us? And I would
Yes.
like to share it with some people that I'm considering for this
Yes,
opportunity.
Miranda will be sending out the recording after we get
Okay.
it back from the system.
Okay. Another question. Is there a certain percentage that if one is awarded the program for paying the project manager, a percentage of the funding that you receive that you could pay that person? Is there?
We don't specify what percentage would need to go toward the project manager. So, I mean, recommend if it's 40,000 from the grant plus 5,000 for what the community is raising. So you have $45,000 budget. You want to look at least probably half of that or more going toward the project manager for their time.
Okay. And specifically, is there a list for supplies? It had a general statement of how you can spend the money. Is there a specific list? I just didn't want anyone to get into doing something and then they're out of pocket. And they didn't have to be if they just knew the, all full information. Is that available later when someone applies?
So a budget's not required as part of the application,
Mhm.
but the selected community, one of the first things is building a budget.
Okay.
There is a sample budget that will provide you to help build your personal budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Miranda, you really sound a lot worse than you did a year ago.
As the nurse, I think she needs to rest her voice for the rest of the day.
I
You don't get to talk.
All
I
right,
just
she's
had-
on voice rest after this.
Yeah, I just had one question because the last person had some of the same questions, but it's just out of curiosity. So when you do the stories that are built into that, do you the long stories? Do you have to have consent from each one of those people for like posting or using those stories? And I guess because of more healthcare background and everything's HIPAA protected in that, and I guess in our current system. So do you have a consent from those people? Because I would think that would make people maybe stand back a little bit in sharing their story.
Yes, so when we do the the interviews or the group conversations, there is a participation form that gets filled out. When we are sharing the stories on social media or out in the community, 9 times out of 10, there is no personal information that is shared with those stories. So there's no name or anything associated with those. It is more so the topic that is being discussed. Maybe there's a quote that's being pulled out, but you never know who said it. If there is a specific person that is being highlighted, that's being more so used as an ambassador then, or that trusted voice to being highlighted in the program, then that is looked at it a little bit more differently. And then of course we are going to that individual more one-on-one, saying, you had a fantastic interview. That was a very unique story. We really want to use that story in a different way. Are you okay with that? And then we would share that story with either that person's photo, or if their story was recorded, then we would share that full story then,
Thank you.
of course. And all of those templates and everything is provided.
Okay. I don't want you to talk anymore.
All right, any other questions? No? Well, thank you all so much for joining and for your time. And, we hope to hear from you and, hope to be able to work with your communities. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you.